The air was thick with confusion as Jason slowly opened his eyes. The sharp metallic scent of unfamiliar technology filled his nostrils, and the soft hum of machines echoed around him. He blinked, trying to adjust his vision, only to be met with a sight that made his heart race. He wasn't in his apartment. The walls around him were sleek and futuristic, bathed in a faint blue glow that seemed to pulse rhythmically, as if the entire room was alive. It looked like the inside of a spaceship. No, not a spaceship. This was far more advanced. Jason sat up, his head spinning. He was lying on a soft, glowing platform, and the room he found himself in was unlike anything he had ever seen. The ceiling was high, with curved panels of glass-like material that reflected the dim, ambient light. There were no windows, but it was clear that this place was not of Earth. He could feel it in his bones. The cold, almost sterile atmosphere was different from anything he had ever experienced. His heart started to pound. His first instinct was to stand up, to try to make sense of his surroundings. But before he could, the soft sound of footsteps approached from behind. His body tensed instinctively. He turned to face the sound, only to freeze at the sight of two figures standing before him. The first woman was tall, her skin shimmering with a subtle iridescent glow. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back like liquid moonlight. Her features were sharp but undeniably beautiful, with eyes that were a shade of purple Jason had never seen before. They were not human, too intense, too knowing, as though they could see right through him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something hauntingly powerful about her presence. The second woman, standing slightly behind the first, was even more extraordinary. Her skin was a deep, radiant blue, her eyes glimmering like stars in a midnight sky. Unlike the first woman's calm demeanor, she exuded a playful yet confident energy, her lips curling into a knowing smile as she observed Jason's reaction. She was equally striking, with a presence that felt both warm and commanding. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he tried to process what he was seeing. These women were no ordinary humans. They were aliens. The thought seemed impossible, yet there they stood, in front of him. His mind raced. Was this a dream? A hallucination? He rubbed his eyes and looked again, but they were still there, real, tangible, and undeniably alien. Where am I? Jason managed to choke out, his voice trembling. He felt as though the words were being dragged from him by some unseen force. The silver-haired woman stepped forward, her presence filling the room as she spoke in a language Jason didn't understand. It wasn't harsh or guttural, but rather melodic, like a song that resonated deep in his chest. She paused, seemingly aware of his confusion, and then spoke again, this time in perfect English. "You are aboard the Nyarla Ark," she said, her voice smooth and serene. "A human has been selected for the experiment." Jason's mind was reeling. The Nyarla Ark? An experiment? What was going on? He tried to sit up, but his body felt heavy, as if the air around him was pressing down on him. "An experiment?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" The blue-skinned woman stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "We are here to study human interactions," she explained, her smile widening slightly. "You've been chosen to live with us. A co-living experiment, you see. To see how humans and our kind can coexist." Jason felt the ground beneath him shift. Co-living? With these two alien women? His heart was pounding now, and his mind couldn't keep up with the flood of questions racing through his head. "But I didn't volunteer for any of this. I don't even know who you are." The silver-haired woman's expression softened slightly. "We know," she said. "This was not voluntary, but it is necessary. You will learn, in time. You will come to understand." Jason struggled to process her words. What did she mean by "come to understand"? And why was he chosen for this experiment? He had never been involved in anything like this. He was just an ordinary guy. He had no training for this, no idea what to expect. And yet here he was, caught in the middle of something far beyond his comprehension. Before he could voice his thoughts, the blue-skinned woman raised her hand, and Jason instantly felt an unexplainable calm settle over him. It wasn't like any calm he had ever experienced before. It was deeper, as if his very mind was being soothed by some outside force. "Do not be afraid," she said gently. "You are safe here. We only wish to study you, to learn." Jason looked between the two of them, trying to make sense of the situation. They were aliens, yes, but they didn't seem hostile. Not yet, anyway. The words, co-living, echoed in his mind. What did they mean by that? What did they expect from him? The silver-haired woman extended her hand towards him, her eyes glowing with an unspoken promise. "We will guide you, Jason. You will live with us, learn our ways, and in return we will help you understand your place in the universe. A new chapter begins today." Jason's head spun. This couldn't be real, could it? There had to be some mistake. But as he gazed at the two alien women, one calm and composed, the other vibrant and full of energy, he felt a strange pull, a strange curiosity. His mind was a whirlwind of questions, and his body was still frozen in disbelief. In that moment, as the two women waited for him to respond, Jason knew one thing for certain: his life was never going to be the same again. Jason awoke the next day with a sinking feeling in his stomach. The strange, futuristic apartment was still the same, as was the eerily calm atmosphere that surrounded him. The alien women, who had introduced themselves as Lyra and Kale, had given him time to adjust to his new environment, but their silence only deepened the mystery. The walls, the floors, the shimmering lights, everything seemed to be part of an elaborate, almost clinical experiment. But what was the true purpose of this experiment? And why had he been chosen? As he got out of the bed and walked toward the glass-like window, a new sense of unease settled in. The world outside the window was vast, unrecognizable, nothing like Earth. There were no streets, no cars, no familiar signs of life. Instead, all he could see was a sprawling, high-tech city that stretched endlessly beneath a sky with hues of purple and blue. Jason tried to focus, but the reality of being so far from home hit him like a tidal wave. He was alone in a strange world with no idea what was happening and no way to escape. He turned back towards the room, hoping for answers. Lyra and Kale had told him that they were part of a co-living experiment, but what did that truly mean? Jason had tried to ask more questions the night before, but their responses had been vague. They spoke of learning, understanding, and peaceful coexistence, but it all felt like a carefully rehearsed script. Nothing made sense. Suddenly, Kale's voice broke the silence, and Jason's body tensed. "Jason," she called, from across the room. He turned to face her, finding her standing near a large holographic screen that flickered with strange symbols. "You've been given time to adjust," she said with a soft smile, but her eyes held something deeper, something more calculating. "Today, you'll begin to understand what it means to be part of this experiment. You'll learn what it takes to live with us." Jason hesitated. "What does that mean exactly? What do you want from me?" Lyra, who had been standing silently near the door, finally spoke. Her voice was calm, but firm. "We do not want anything from you, Jason. We are studying your reactions, your emotions, your understanding of what it means to live together. The co-living experiment is about harmony, integration, and peace. Our kind has always believed in unity. You are the first human we have chosen." Jason's confusion deepened, but he felt something stirring within him. A sense of curiosity, maybe. He still didn't trust them, not fully, but something about the way they spoke made him want to know more. The lack of clear answers only fueled his desire to understand what was going on. Kyle beckoned him over to the table where a meal was already prepared. It looked like nothing he had ever seen before. Glowing fruits, strange liquids, and dishes that seemed both beautiful and alien. "We will start with the basics. Kale said, her voice as light as the air around them. You will eat, and then you will see. Jason slowly took a seat at the table, the bizarre food before him feeling both fascinating and unsettling. He picked up a small fruit and hesitated, his mind racing. It was almost as if they were waiting for him to do something, to prove something. He took a tentative bite. The taste was nothing like he had ever imagined. It wasn't just sweet or sour. It was a complex combination of flavors that seemed to awaken every sense in his body. The more he chewed, the more it felt like his body was absorbing something. Something otherworldly. A strange warmth spread through him, and for a moment he almost forgot where he was. Kale and Lyra watched him closely, their eyes gleaming with interest. Good, Kyle said softly. You're beginning to understand. Jason looked up at them, his mouth dry. Understand what? Lyra leaned in, her voice lowered. This is part of the process. We are integrating you into our way of life, slowly, piece by piece. The experiment is not just physical, Jason, it's psychological, emotional. You will learn to connect with us. With us as in all of us. Not just the two of us, but with the entire species. You will understand what it means to live with us, to thrive. Jason stared at her, feeling a strange sensation twist in his gut. You want me to live with you? Like, forever? Lyra's eyes softened. Not forever, but long enough to see what you can learn from us. From living together as equals. From understanding. Jason struggled to comprehend what she was saying. They wanted him to live with them, to become part of their world. But why? What was the real reason behind this experiment? They had told him it was for peace, but Jason wasn't convinced. He could feel their calm, but there was something beneath it. A tension he couldn't explain. Something was off. And yet, in some strange way, he couldn't deny that there was also something captivating about them. Lyra and Kale were not just alien beings. They were beautiful, powerful, and full of mystery. There was an allure to them that Jason couldn't ignore, even though he knew he should be wary. He had to admit that he was drawn to them, drawn to the enigma they represented. Suddenly, the holographic screen flickered again, and Kale's voice broke through his thoughts. Jason, we'll begin the next part of your integration. We'll show you how we communicate, how we connect. Jason looked between the two women, his heart racing. There was no turning back now. He was part of this experiment for better or worse, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming next. The days blended together in a haze of confusion and unease as Jason adapted to his new life aboard the Nyarla Ark. Despite the beauty of the setting and the overwhelming intrigue of being surrounded by alien technology and exotic food, something about the situation didn't sit right with him. The peaceful facade of the co-living experiment was starting to crack, revealing the underlying tension that had been brewing since he had arrived. It had been a week since Jason had begun living with Lyra and Kyle, but the more time he spent with them, the more he sensed the complex web of power dynamics that underpinned their seemingly harmonious coexistence. It wasn't just the differences in their species, but something far deeper. There was an unspoken struggle for control, a tug of war over influence and dominance, and Jason found himself caught in the middle. Lyra, the silver-haired woman, was the calm, authoritative one. She spoke with a quiet strength, as if everything she said was weighed with years of wisdom and experience. Her eyes never wavered when she spoke, and Jason noticed how the other beings in the facility seemed to respect her implicitly. She was a leader. He could feel it in the air whenever she entered a room. But there was something about her that made Jason uneasy. She was distant, calculating, as if everything was part of some grand plan he couldn't see. Kale, on the other hand, was unpredictable. Her radiant blue skin glowed with a lively energy, her eyes filled with a mischievous gleam that contrasted sharply with Lyra's controlled demeanor. While Lyra exuded authority, Kale exuded freedom, chaos even. Her emotions were open, raw, and often in flux. Jason couldn't help but be drawn to her wild energy, But there was something unsettling in her unpredictable behavior. Sometimes she would challenge Lyra in subtle ways, questioning decisions, teasing Jason, or even pushing boundaries. Jason could feel the subtle shifts in the room whenever Kale's energy grew stronger. She was like a storm waiting to happen. The struggle for control between the two women was becoming more apparent. The tension was palpable, especially during their interactions with Jason. They both wanted him in different ways, one with calm persuasion, the other with bold spontaneity. Each woman used her own method of influence, and Jason found himself torn between them. One afternoon, the tension reached its peak. Jason was sitting in the central room of their living space, trying to get some answers. He had asked Lyra numerous times about the purpose of the experiment, about what was expected of him, but she had never given him a clear answer. Kyle had been more playful, offering cryptic responses that only deepened his confusion. He had spent the last few days observing their behavior, trying to figure out what they were really after. Lyra and Kyle entered the room at the same time, their presence unmistakable. Lyra's gaze immediately fixed on Jason, her eyes soft but firm. "We've decided it's time for you to undergo a deeper integration," she said, her tone cool and calm. "You will be part of a simulation. We need to understand how you adapt to our way of life, how your mind works under pressure." Jason's heart raced. "A simulation?" he repeated, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. What kind of simulation? Before Lyra could answer, Kale stepped forward, her eyes flashing with a playful gleam. "It's not as dangerous as it sounds," she said with a grin. "But it will test your limits. We'll see how you handle the situation." Jason looked between them, sensing the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Lyra had the final say, but Kale was pushing him in her own way. There was no doubt in his mind now. They were not just conducting an experiment. They were using him as a pawn in a larger game, and he didn't even know the rules. "I'm not your experiment," Jason said, his voice firming with a mix of frustration and defiance. "You can't just control me like this. I have the right to know what's going on." Lyra's expression remained unchanged. "You have no idea what's at stake, Jason," she replied calmly. "You don't understand what this experiment could mean, not just for you, but for the future of humanity and our kind. The power dynamics at play here are far more complicated than you realize. This isn't just about you." Kyle smirked, stepping closer to Jason. "Oh, but it is about you, Jason. We need you to understand that you are part of something bigger. You can't just walk away from this. You're a key player in this experiment, whether you like it or not." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the weight of their words pressing down on him. It was clear now. The alien co-living experiment wasn't just about observing his interactions with them, it was about control. They wanted him to submit, to adapt, to become part of their world. But what if he didn't want to? For the first time since arriving, Jason felt truly trapped. He had no escape. He was caught between the power struggle of two alien women, each of whom had their own motives, their own desires. Lyra wanted him to understand the bigger picture, while Kale seemed more interested in challenging him, pushing him to his limits. Jason wasn't sure which one of them was more dangerous, or if both were just using him as a tool for something he couldn't yet comprehend. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as the tension between the three of them grew. Jason realized that this wasn't just about learning to live with the aliens. This was about survival. And it wasn't just about surviving the simulation they were about to put him through. It was about surviving the emotional and psychological games they were playing with him. "I won't let you control me," Jason said, his voice trembling, with a mix of fear and determination. "I won't be your pawn." Kale laughed softly, her laughter echoing in the room. "You think you have a choice?" she said, her voice teasing but edged with something darker. "You've already agreed to this experiment, Jason. You're already ours." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're not a pawn, but you will play a part in something much larger than yourself." Jason could feel the weight of their words settling into him, their control tightening around him like an invisible grip. He didn't know how he was going to escape this, whether physically or emotionally, but one thing was certain: the power dynamics had shifted. He was no longer just a passive participant in their world. He was now part of the game, whether he liked it or not. And as the two alien women stood before him, Jason realized that the hardest part of this experiment wasn't going to be surviving the alien world. It was going to be surviving them. Jason had endured countless tests, simulations, and emotional manipulations over the last few weeks. Every day he found himself slipping further into the web of control that Lyra and Kale had woven around him. Their intentions were clear now. They were not just studying him, they were reshaping him, trying to mold him into something they could understand, something they could control. Yet amidst the chaos of their conflicting personalities, there was a sense of understanding that was starting to form. A fragile bond, yes, but a bond nonetheless. It had been a long, exhausting journey, but Jason was beginning to grasp the real nature of the experiment. It wasn't just about testing the limits of human adaptability or forcing him into some strange co-living arrangement. No, the real goal was far more personal. Lyra and Kale wanted to understand humanity, not just through observation, but through the raw emotional experience of living with one of them. They sought something deeper: empathy, connection, the ability to break through the boundaries that separated their species. Jason had come to realize that he was a bridge. He was the one who had the power to either make or break their understanding of humans. They had tried to break him down emotionally, to test his trust, his patience, and his willpower. But now, for the first time since the experiment had started, Jason understood something that would change everything. It was not about submission. It was not about being controlled. It was about finding common ground. One evening after another, emotionally exhausting simulation, Jason found himself standing alone in the observation room. He had spent hours learning to communicate with Lyra and Kale through the alien language they had taught him. It was supposed to be a breakthrough moment, a test of how well he had adapted to their way of life. But now, standing there in silence, Jason felt like he was drowning in confusion once again. He had been given every chance to succeed, every opportunity to prove himself capable of adapting, but something inside him had been broken along the way. The constant push and pull between Lyra's calm authority and Kale's chaotic energy had left him exhausted, unsure of who he was anymore. Suddenly, the doors to the observation room opened, and both Lyra and Kale walked in. Their presence filled the room as always, but this time, Jason didn't feel overwhelmed. This time he stood tall, not as a subject of their experiment, but as an equal. Lyra's eyes were soft, her expression unreadable. "Jason," she began, her voice steady, "we have observed you, we've tested you, and we've learned much about your species. But now the question is not what we can learn from you. The question is what you can learn from us." Jason looked at her, his heart pounding. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He had felt like a prisoner for so long, but now he understood the truth. They were offering him something more than just knowledge. They were offering him the chance to make a decision that would change the course of this experiment. Kale, standing beside Lyra, gave him a playful smile, but there was something different in her eyes now. Something softer. "You've been a challenge, Jason. But in a way, that's why we chose you. You're not just part of the experiment. You're part of the future of human-alien relationships. And you have the power to decide what kind of future that will be." Jason's mind raced. The weight of their words settled heavily on his shoulders. This was it. He could choose to reject them, to turn his back on this experiment and walk away. But in doing so, he would be closing the door on something bigger than himself. He would be rejecting the chance to create something new, something transformative. For the first time since he had arrived, Jason realized that he wasn't just an observer. He was a participant, a key player in a story that was bigger than his personal struggles. "I've been thinking," Jason said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You wanted me to understand your species, to adapt. But I think what we really need to understand is each other, not just the differences between us, but the similarities. We all want the same things: connection, understanding, peace. Maybe we can start there. Kale stepped forward, her smile widening. You're beginning to see, Jason. We never wanted to break you. We wanted to build something with you. Something that goes beyond species, beyond differences. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting a quiet sense of pride. It's not just about co-living. It's about coexisting. And for that we need trust. We need empathy. We need understanding. Jason felt a sense of clarity wash over him. This wasn't just about surviving the experiment. It was about thriving, about creating a bridge between two worlds, a bridge that would last long after the experiment was over. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, of course. But this was the moment that mattered. This was the moment when he could decide to let go of the fear, the doubt, and the struggle for control, and embrace something new. I choose to learn, Jason said, his voice firm. I choose to understand. I choose to live with you, not just as a subject, but as a partner, as an equal. Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time she reached out, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. Then the experiment is over, Jason. You've completed it, and in doing so you've created something that can change everything. Jason looked at Kale, who nodded approvingly. You've learned what we needed to learn. And in doing so, you've shown us something we never expected. The power of choice, the power of understanding. The three of them stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. But there was no longer any tension. There was no longer any struggle for control. Jason had made his choice, and with that choice, he had brought them all closer together. The Nyarla arc was no longer just a test. It was a new beginning,